Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lorena Sosa, and I'm from Orlando Zero Hour. We're really lucky to be able to be here with these awesome panelists, and I'll leave it off to Ellie to introduce them.
Hi, my name is Ellie. I'm also part of Zero Hour, and I'm so happy to be part of all these wonderful panelists that have joined our call today. First up is Destiny, and she will introduce us to herself.
Cool. Hey everyone, my name is Destiny. I am originally from the Bronx, New York. I'm now living in Dallas, Texas, where ironically I started my plant-based diet in this very like meat-centered state, and it's been awesome. I do community organizing out here in Dallas. I also organize for the Vegemihas Dallas chapter. For anyone who doesn't know what Vegemihas is, we are a people of color collective that focuses on food justice. So I host a bunch of POC only events out here, talking about food accessibility and things like that. I also run my Instagram page called Eat Your Destiny, where I teach people how to shop on a budget for vegan food, how to cook really simple and basic but delicious meals. And yeah, I'm really excited to be on this panel. This is my first time ever being on a panel, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm glad to be here with everybody. That is from Orlando. I do have family in Orlando, so it's cool to kind of communicate with people out there and just learn from y'all. I believe even panel like people on a panel can also be be students and taking notes and learning from their experiences. So if you see me taking notes, it's because I find whatever you're saying very educational. So thank you all for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Our next panelist is Jeremy, and he will introduce himself.
Hey guys, first off, thank you for having me. I'm Jeremy, known as Orlando Bearded Vegan. I'm based out of Orlando, Florida. I've been here most of my life. And pretty much I like to focus on great food that you can find in Orlando and all around. I am also the events director for Nights for Animal Rights at UCF, University of Central Florida, and the health events director for Central Florida Deals, trying to just host some plant-based awesome events, and really just excited to be here. This is also my first panel, so really excited to just be on this and share some information and really learn some more. And yeah, that's really it.
That's awesome. And we have Nikki.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Nikki. I'm the founder of Orlando Vegans. Orlando Vegans is a meetup group and a blog that brings like-minded individuals together. I also help businesses veganize their menu and test out different vegan products, different things like that. And I'm also the food organizer for Central Florida Earth Day and Central Florida Veg Fest, and just really trying to showcase the different vegan options that are out there right now. And thank you for having me.
And we have Lana.
Hi, this is Lana Widegenaut. I am the Deputy Partnerships Director at Zero Hour International. I am also engaged in food systems advocacy with plant dining partnerships, with Youth Climate Safe Movement, which is an international youth movement to address animal agriculture in our climate action, and in Cultivate America, which is a new organization that I co-founded to specifically work on food system solutions to the climate crisis. So I'm really interested in addressing factory farming and food systems and the youth climate movement. And I've had some opportunities to do that internationally as well, speaking at the United Nations about how food systems are connected to climate, and working in the agriculture working group for the youth constituency to the United Nations framework on Convention on Climate Change. So I'm really interested in the international, national level how factory farming ties in with successful climate action.
Thank you so much. And so the purpose of this food systems panel is to really grasp where our food comes from, highlighting things such as factory farming, the importance of plant-based foods, not only to help the climate crisis, but making sure those are really accessible. And so what we want to do is make sure that you guys have the best understanding as possible as to what our food systems are. And so our first questions for our panelists is what got them interested with food systems, and if they can, define it for the audience so they have a pretty good understanding of what it is.
I can jump in first, talking about a little bit of what food systems is. So food systems are basically what gets the food from where it's produced, like the farm, to your table. So that is the transportation, it's the agriculture, it means also the different consumption practices that people have. It's basically the whole process, all the different systems that interact with food distribution, production, consumption. And I got interested in food systems because of I used to work in animal protection issues, and I saw that that was a large area where animals are being impacted, and also because I care about environmental issues. And I realized that this had a lot of potential if we were able to address food systems to be able to better counteract the climate crisis, especially because it has such an impact in the short term. We always talk about how food is related to methane production, and if we're able to combat that, we can reverse climate change a lot faster. So I think that's really interesting.
Well, I stopped eating meat when I was 14, so about like 16, 17 years ago. I was just a little rebellious punk rock kid in New York City, and people in my community and people I looked up to were already vegan vegetarian. And I watched a slaughterhouse footage from PETA, and I vowed never to eat meat again. But it wasn't until 2011 when I went vegan that it really started to resonate with me, because I started to realize that it's all around us, from the products that we wear, different things like that. So that's when I started to really become passionate about it. It was probably in 2011. And just really understanding where our food comes from and letting people know where it comes from, and showing them that there are alternatives and that they can survive and live healthfully without having to eat meat products.
Yeah, for me, the main thing was health. A health focus was what really got me interested. When I started to want to shift my health to eating better, I started to analyze the conventional food system layout and how difficult it could be from some environments to get really good organic food for a low rate or a rate that's reasonable. And it got me interested to see that, pushing that plant-based diet and pushing those things, and how we can change the conventional food system can lead to a healthier lifestyle for all people in all social economical statuses.
For me, when I think of like a food system, I literally think of like the cycle, like Lana was saying, the food production, the distribution, consumption, and then waste. And I really try to like sit and think like, where do I fit in that cycle? Because I don't directly like advocate for like, with like food production and distribution, or even like retail markets and stuff like that. But I am a person who eats food. And I think like we're all, as people who consume food, we're all part of the food system, right? We all consume it, we all buy it, and then we also contribute to waste. So I think like my role in the food system is just like really educating people on how to like use what you have and reduce your waste. There's no reason why we should be like wasting produce and different parts of like the broccoli and things like that. So I think that like my role in the food system is just to help like with the waste aspect.
All right, so for our next question, how did you all start to really adjust your diet to the right diet for everything?
For me, I think I did what most vegetarians did. I just kind of stuck to veggie burgers and pizza, not really understanding that those were also pretty harmful to my body. But obviously, I'm vegan for the animals. But when I was became vegan in 2011, that's when the health factors really started to hit me. Especially because I have an autoimmune disease. So I started to incorporate more raw, whole foods, plant-based, like eliminating canned products, frozen products, and just really like shopping around, going to the store, investigating, reading a lot, and just becoming kind of like an expert in that. And But at the same time, companies in the food industry were releasing never before seen products like vegan meats or vegan cheeses, cultural cuisine, and that really started to change the game. So I thought it was important for me as a blogger to like showcase those alternatives as well. So that way people know they're not giving up the food of their family or different things like that, that they can still eat vegan because food is nostalgic. It's what brings us together. And we need to be able to translate those family and cultural recipes with vegan ingredients. So just a lot of exploring, going out into the community, going to restaurants, different things like that, and eventually building partnerships with businesses in the community and corporate businesses to really get veganism out there more on a higher level.
Yeah, for me, it was a slow transition. I actually started out pescatarian for about 2 years, and then I shifted to vegetarian for about a year and a half, and then now veganism for about another year and a half. So it was a slow transition where I knew I wanted to change for my health and I wanted to have a healthier diet. I had gastrointestinal issues and stuff that I was dealing with before I transitioned. And I noticed when I took those things out of my diet, it started to change. So I think, for people who are interested, whatever works for them, like right now, like Nikki said, we have a really good position where you can eat your favorite foods, whether they're junk food, vegan type items, or ethnic type foods where you can make them plant-based. So it's really well-rounded. We're a position where people can find something that works for them, and there's a balance between all of it. Right? You can be whole plant-based and be eating a raw diet, and then you can also indulge on a Beyond Burger. I think everybody has their own fit, but for me, it was a gradual change.
I think so I went vegan for health reasons. I'm still vegan for health reasons. And for me, I didn't necessarily like see a documentary and be like, oh my God, I need to go vegan. But I was just doing research about how to clear up my acne. And I was like, oh, I have to eliminate dairy. So my like vegan journey definitely started with like eliminating dairy and ice cream and milk. And then kind of realizing that milk isn't everything. So that, opened up the a whole other issue, and just, having to work around that. Eventually I stopped eating chicken and stuff like that. So it happened really fast, I feel like, because as soon as, I eliminated the dairy, I was like, might as well just stop eating meat. And that's just how I did it. And I've been vegan for like 2 years now. I think in the beginning it was really hard for me I didn't know what to eat. I was like, I don't like salads. I don't want to eat a salad. And I think a lot of people like that's their biggest issue. They're like, what can I eat? And it wasn't really until I realized like I am overthinking it. Like anything that I ate before, I can still eat now. And like all of y'all are saying, like we all have so many like different vegan options now. There's almost like no excuse for even trying it. Like I think everybody can try it, and if it's not for them, it's not for them. But like the fact that we have all these options is just like it's so easy to do it. I think what the hard part is like really unlearning how to feed yourself. Like we are taught that like meat has to be on your plate, and that's the part that I think I would like to like educate people on, because we all know that like you don't need that type of protein on your plate.
Yeah, definitely. I had the opposite journey of Destiny. As most young people, health was not on my mind when I went vegan. I was thinking about the environment, I was thinking about the animals. Health was nowhere on my mind. But once I went vegan, I was like, I'm so close to having this really healthy diet that is being advocated for, that can, people talk about like reversing chronic diseases, stopping chronic diseases, like talk about diabetes and heart disease and all these terrible things that people face that they're able to successfully fight with plant-based eating. So I really appreciate all of these options that exist. Like everyone was saying, they're so amazing, especially if you're going to transition to veganism. Like knowing that you can eat the exact same thing you're eating right now, except that it comes from plants and not from animals, is so amazing that we can tell anyone that in this day and age. I think that's incredible. That being said, once I did, after I went vegetarian first, and then I went vegan, and I was eating more of these like processed products, and then I realized that I could slowly, incorporate also, like Nikki, more whole foods into my diet and start shaping that to be a healthier diet that I would be thankful for later on as well, not only for like environmental reasons and for, you know, the harm that I'm able to save from happening to animals, but also for my health, you know, for the sustainability of my work and for my body and all of that. I have been working towards that as well. That's not to say that you can't go vegan for the animals or for the environment and keep eating the exact same thing you did before. And obviously that's not as healthy. It's still better than eating animal products, but I think that's just an amazing option that we have, that, you know, if I am craving something, that I can just have the plant-based version of that. Like if I have a day where I really want ice cream or I really want like nuggets or something, that we have all of these different brands, that there's literally no reason why you would be like, oh my goodness, no, I can't be vegan anymore, because every single thing you might crave is already available in a plant-based way. And if you are looking for better health, it's also so amazing in that aspect as well.
So Zero Hour advocates for plant-based diets to reverse the environmental damage that our current food system has implicated on our planet. And so I want to ask you guys, why do you view plant-based foods as opportunistic in terms of, you know, the damage and reversing that damage and really, you know, fighting against climate change?
Well, I mean, this is a great point here. I think like just science proves alone that animal agriculture uses the most land, the most water, and creates the most amount of methane gases, which is one of the most toxic things for our ozone and our environment. That's undisputable. That's science. There's a bunch of different, you know, studies that we can all quote here on that. And, you know, with that being said, you know, we don't need that in our diet. You know, we're all here plant-based, we're all here healthy. And by eliminating these, you know, factory farms and eliminating animal agriculture, will drastically take years back for our planet that we've stolen, that we can bring back by just simply just giving up a delicacy to people that they just desire. You know, we have so many options that we don't need that. And, you know, just the gases and, you know, the water for, you know, one beef burger is just beyond that. And when you look at some other big time companies that address that they're eco-friendly or you're striving for peace, like Greenpeace or World Wildlife Foundation, you look on their websites and unfortunately you don't see that they mention animal agriculture as their leading issue. They will mention, let's save some water, or they'll mention, you know, use less plastic, which those are all great things. I'm not talking those things down, but I think we need to all be having a conversation more of how animal agriculture directly affects, you know, our planet, and how it's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest thing that we can easily and abruptly change to take that time back for our planet.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on what Lana said about how some of the alternatives may not be, you know, healthier, or they may not be healthy, but they're healthier and they are processed. But we have to keep in mind a lot of times that it's about progress, not perfection. And at the end of the day, we have to remember cattle produces methane. Animal agriculture leads to global warming and especially contributes to deforestation. So even just omitting meat from your diet is enough to drastically reduce that. But by going vegan, you can actually reduce your carbon footprint by up to 73% per person. So veganism is the single biggest way to be able to combat the environmental effects. And yeah, it just, you know, we use like veganism as kind of like an umbrella term, but there's so many components to it. There's the plant-based factor where you are whole foods plant-based. There's the environmental factor, there's the health factor, different things like that. And you know, in the community, we refer to folks as like, you know, eco-vegans or health vegans or whatever. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to that top point about we do not need animals to survive or to enjoy a good meal. And at the end of the day, we're doing our part by helping the environment.
I think this is one of those questions where we're pretty much all going to say the same thing, because we all know like it is what it is. Raising animals for food is just not sustainable. And I will say, like, with my platform, I don't really speak on this much just because I did go vegan for like health reasons rather than like environmental. So, not even gonna lie, I'm not super educated on this topic, but I know enough to know that like you don't need to eat animals and that it does affect the environment. I think with my audience, I focus more on if not going vegan and like totally eliminating meats, like Nikki said, at least limiting your like meat intake and how much meat you're buying, just because like not only does it affect the environment, but like what it does to your body, you know? So I'm kind of like gonna take a step back from this question just because like this is not my expertise, but I definitely like encourage people to limit their intake just because it affects so many different aspects, you know?
Can I touch on that real quick? Sorry. You mentioned that your blog is more about like health reasons, different things like that. Whereas like Orlando Vegans, we're really about those transitional foods, you know, so everyone has their own form of like activism and how they want to market or display veganism, like Lana is for climate change, you know, different things like that. So I think that's a really good point that you brought up. So don't discourage yourself from this conversation because you focus on health. I think that's excellent because then you're going to get folks who want to be healthier, see what you're eating, and be like, oh, you know what? I want to do that. I can do that too. Whereas maybe my audience is like, oh, look, pizza, sushi, and burgers. Like, I can still eat the same. So everyone has their own form of activism.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Nikki. Like, it's really important to have these perspectives, you know, for health reasons, for animals, for all these different ways that you can be vegan and all these different ways that you can live a vegan lifestyle. I think that's really important that people see that from all kinds of backgrounds and for all kinds of reasons you can do this. And I think it's been echoed before. We definitely agree. Like, you don't need to eat animals. It's an environmentally destructive industry that you're supporting, and you would be healthier if you didn't. I'd love to throw in a little bit of statistics to like some of the things that we've been saying. So there's actually the most extensive study on food consumption came out of the University of Oxford, and that's the one that we've been talking about, on that how they found that the single most impactful thing that you can do to reduce your carbon footprint, to have less of an impact on the earth as a person, is to eat a vegan diet. That's the most impactful thing that you can do within your lifestyle, right? And if change is going to start with you, if you want to, you know, help the environment, if you want to think like, okay, there's so many different things that I could do. You know, I could stop using plastic straws. I could, you know, not drive today. What's the most impactful thing I could do? The answer is eating a plant-based diet, eating a vegan diet, or as much as is accessible to you. That's the most impactful thing that you can do. And also, as far as methane emissions that we were talking about, those have been found to be 25 to 100 times more impactful in the short term than carbon dioxide. So what that means is, if we are going to focus on getting rid of some of the methane emissions, it has been found that there would be tangible benefits immediately if we're able to change our food systems, because they are contributing to so many shorter term gases, nitrous oxide as well. Over 70% of nitrous oxide comes from the animal agriculture industry, right? So if we're able to make an impact in those gases that are really destructive in like the next 5 years, then we'll see benefits to the environment in the next 5 years. And what that means is that it makes it significantly more likely that we'll be able to mitigate the climate crisis overall, because we're buying ourselves more time to work on other technologies to go transition out of different industries such as oil and gas and things like that. So that's why it's so, so important. And also, as far as greenhouse gases, it is agreed upon in the scientific industry among scientists that the animal agriculture industry is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the global transportation industry. Different measures have it somewhere between 14.5% of global emissions to some of them have it as high as 80 or 90%. There's not really a consensus, but they know that it's enormous and that it's more than all transportation in the entire world. So you really can't ignore that.
Can I make another point too? Sorry. And then I'll stop talking. But kind of bringing up about the land and the water and different things like that, one of the biggest questions we always get is like, where do you get your vitamins? Where do you get your B12? The only vitamin that anyone really needs to maybe take a supplement of, whether you're plant-based or not, is B12, and we have to remember and know that B12 actually comes from the soil with which the cow eats, and then the cow is killed, and then that's how people get their B12. So it's like we can just eliminate that middle factor, the cow, and get B12 in our vitamins in alternative ways, and certain concepts like cage-free and halal and different things like that. I mean, I'm Middle Eastern myself. Those still are harmful to the environment. They're still harmful to your body. I mean, cage-free does not mean that chickens are walking around all happy. So yeah, it's the same concept.
If I could quickly jump in as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I was like trying to unmute myself. Yeah, some measures have actually found, I know a researcher who has been looking into how, well, cage-free is just like removing the cages and then the animals are still packed just as tightly, right? So it's like pretty similar environmentally. But the ones where animals are actually allowed more space to roam are actually more environmentally destructive, because then the animals have an impact on larger amounts of land and resources. So what's good for the animals in terms of like animal agriculture is like worse for the environment. So really the best thing to do is to go towards a more plant-rich food system, and that they found can actually sequester or take over 500 gigatons of carbon dioxide out of the air. So that's like actually having a large impact in reversing climate change.
Okay, so for my next question, I want to know each of your guys' stance on factory farming, and do you think if it's an unspoken conversation?
I can start with this one. So factory farming, in my opinion, is very like unspoken. I'm in my late 20s, nearly 30, and I'm just now learning like what factory farming is. And I think that's only because I'm vegan, right? Like when I went vegan, this just was one of those things that came up in like the research that I was doing. But if I wasn't vegan, I probably still wouldn't know, like it took a lot of unlearning of like we grow up thinking that, like Nikki said, the cows are just like galloping in the fields and the chickens are clucking or whatever chickens do, like, and they're living these like happy lives, and like yes, they're killed and we eat them, but it's like out of sight, out of mind, like we don't really focus on that. And yeah, like it definitely took a lot of unlearning to like on my part, and that's what I really try to like educate my audience about. I don't necessarily talk about like the oppression of the animals. I focus more on the oppression of the workers. And I think I had to like take a step back from my ignorance when I started like even researching about factory farming, because initially I'm like, oh my God, like how can people work there? They're terrible people, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, you look at the stats and you see that majority of the factory farm workers are Black and brown. Majority of them are undocumented. They're getting paid maybe minimum wage. They don't have overtime hours. They're working 60 hours plus a week. They don't have the luxury to work from home during COVID-19. Like these are just, they're working in like horrible conditions. And the type of vegan that I am, unpopular opinion, but I will always put people before animals. And so when I advocate for this and I speak on factory farms, I focus on the workers, because they're just as oppressed as the animals that they're unfortunately killing for us to eat. Yeah, that's just my stance.
Yeah, I think we're all going to agree that we all disagree and disapprove of factory farming at the end of the day. It is definitely an unspoken, conversation. I mean, if we go out and poll some people and say, hey, when I say farms or factory farms, what do you think? Most people think farms where, like Destiny said, cows are running around, pigs are running around. It's a family unity that's been owned for hundreds of years, out on a plain. But that's not the case where we're at on all aspects, whether it's land animals or, fish or salmon. All these things are being destroyed at massive rates and in unethical ways, whether it is for the people, that are there working it, they're in situations where they can't get out of, like Destiny said. And, there's also points where like we are forced as an industry to put ourselves in these positions, and we're not talking about it. We're letting these corporations get by just meeting them for their dollar and going money hungry just because it's efficient for them, but it's not efficient for our planet, and it's not efficient for the animals, and it's not right. So that's what I'll say on that.
I really like what Destiny said, because that is problem too. A lot of our produce from farms or coconuts or whatever does come from slave labor and really harmful positions for humans as well. And it's just a really corrupt world that we live in. And my hope is the more that we put, intersectional veganism out there, I think that we're going to be down the right path, especially in this time. Like I said, I haven't eaten meat since 17 years ago, and the times have changed so much. Like there wasn't an Impossible Burger at Burger King, or there wasn't really organic options, different things like that. So I'm hoping that we're progressing from certain conditions like that. And as far as it being an unspoken conversation, I kind of say yes and no because of cognitive dissonance. I feel like people know exactly where their meat comes from, but they do turn a blind eye and they buy their package at the store. They don't even think twice about it. They grab it because if we're talking about processed vegan meat products, let's talk about how a cow was processed, slaughtered, and crammed into a package. It's the biggest process of all. And then that's what the meat and dairy industry do. They put the pictures of these happy cows on their branding, on their packaging, and make it seem like it's all rainbows and butterflies. And people lean on concepts like cage-free as like a safety net, when in reality, everything that we do has some sort of harmful aspect to it. Everything that we do, the car that we drive or the tires on our car, everything that we do, and we just have to make the best choices that we can, at least every day, just make a different decision that could affect humans, the environment, animals, everyone. So
Yeah, we all agree. Factory farming is a really destructive industry for the workers, for the animals, for the environment, for so many reasons. I would say that it's an unspoken conversation because I don't think people talk about it enough, in the literal sense. I think that it's something that we try to avoid, right? We don't want to think about where our food comes from oftentimes. Like most people go to the grocery store and they want to pretend like this food is coming from a wonderful place and they don't want to actually look into it. They don't want to actually check any of this because they don't want to be uncomfortable and they don't want to actually have to change their behavior, have to deal with this really complex thing that we've shoved away, right? That's why we have these like factory farms so that we can get out as much food as possible and have them in these like places. That's why we don't have them like right in the center of our cities or anything. Like we don't want to see it. We try to put it as far away as we can. Because this is something that we're ashamed of if we stop to think of it for even a second. If anyone who watches like footage for factory farms, no one is going to say that that is an honorable industry, an honorable practice for us to be getting our food from. And like we've said, it also is really destructive for the environment, for the climate, and for all these issues that we're fighting for a future at 0 Hour.
I agree. I think human beings have such a hard time dealing with uncomfortable concepts. I don't want to get too derailed, but talking about sexual harassment or rape or just any type of difficult conversation, human beings just don't want to do it. They just want to turn away, act like it doesn't exist. And going back to what Dusty said, it's all about unlearning. Our parents taught us to eat meat. Our parents taught us to do this. Our parents, it's all generational. And it's I feel like our generation is just I'm going to question that and say I'm not going to do that. I mean, I remember being really little, maybe 8, and going to the store and seeing a package of meat and it had red juice on it. And I said, Mom, what is this red juice in this package? And she told me it was blood. And I was like, okay. So I kind of always just had that. But sometimes you just have to click it into place for some people, even if you have to get as raw as showing them the conditions.
Thank you so much. And I honestly, adding on to the impact of factory farming, something I really wanted to highlight is that factory farming is damaging in terms of water footprint and then obviously impact on animals. But I think a lot of people don't really understand that factory farming. So what ends up happening is that farmers use manure to fertilize their crops. And what this often actually leads to is manure often ends up leaching into a river nearby, ruining nearby water supplies. In 2014, Toledo, Ohio's water supply was actually shut down for the whole summer. And so it's problematic in a lot of ways. And the good thing is that there's a lot of solutions to this. Obviously, transitioning towards a plant-based diet to, limit your impact or contributions towards these sort of systems is a great solution, as well as recognizing that when we're pushing for solutions that advocate for a reduction in things like manure, this is extremely beneficial. And Maryland actually recently passed legislation that pushes towards reduction of manure onto crops so that their water supply isn't damaged. So I just really wanted to highlight that. So my next question, obviously, since we're advocating for a diversification of our diet and towards plant-based diets, I think we need to highlight, most importantly, accessibility within communities of color and low-income communities. So I definitely want to bring it to our panelists to discuss food deserts within our communities.
This is actually a very important topic to me because there are so many people who have limited access to affordable and nutritious food. And I really love that you brought up water because, if we talk about, pipelines, different things like that, it all comes down to capitalism and money and greed. And I feel like I personally, my activism is I want to hijack capitalism corporations and kind of get, in their head. But honestly, it's truly a privilege to be able to live in a bustling city where we have fully vegan, plant-based restaurants, plus restaurants and stores that are willing to add it to their menu, even if they're not all plant-based vegan. Not everyone has that luxury. This is why I feel like it's important for me to highlight options at low-budget grocery stores or fast food places, different things like that, because not everyone has those options. They don't have that fully vegan restaurant, and can they afford to go to it? Everyone has this idea that vegan is expensive, and I will show you, it doesn't have to be. But I understand if some kid in Arizona or something has no access to, Lucky's or Lucky's Market or Sprouts, does that mean he can't be plant-based? Does that mean he can't be vegan, because he doesn't have access to it? So we need to consider geographic location, poverty, eating disorders, disabilities, and so forth when we're talking to people about veganism and a plant-based diet.
Yeah, I think food deserts doesn't just address the food that's available there. It also addresses the fact that the lack of these cultures and this society that are in these food deserts, they can't grow their own food. Their availability to have gardens or community gardens are extremely low. And this conversation is not spoken about enough. But, in some of these areas, you'll go by and you'll see 15 McDonald's and Burger Kings within, 4 square miles, but you won't see a health food store. You'll see 15 liquor stores in these areas as well. So I think it's important, like Nikki said, to highlight, meeting people where they're at, highlighting how you can eat plant-based, how you can find these plant-based options, and what you can do to link up with other communities and other people in your community to find these affordable options where you're at. While we're still putting pressure on corporations and our local governments to add more subsidies to up and coming people who want to open a plant-based community or do a pop-up or a farmers market in that. That's something that we should continue to ask for our local representatives in all of our cities, because that's going to help meeting us where we're at in our current system.
I think with food deserts, so I recently watched something that was talking about like the term food deserts and how we need to maybe adjust that language, because that kind of implies that there's like nothing. Like these communities, these low income, poor, Black and brown communities have nothing, right? And that's not true. Like they have McDonald's, they have the liquor store, they have the bodega that sells the hot Cheetos and cup of noodles. Like they have food. It might be like food like products, but they still are like, they have access to eating something, right? Like the issue, like we've all been saying, is the accessibility to fresh, healthy food. And that doesn't mean that we like throw a Whole Foods straight up in the hood. And that doesn't mean that we open like all these supermarkets because the community can't afford that, right? And even like adding vegan options to like McDonald's menus and stuff like that, it helps, but it's like not the solution. Like in my opinion, I think the solution is opening like community ran supermarkets, doing more like local farmers markets in these neighborhoods that are affordable, where you can use like your EBT card kind of thing, and just like really doing like community work so that we can eat healthy food and not have to depend on these corporations and their maybe like vegan sandwich, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I've heard a lot of people move away from calling them food deserts because deserts are natural and these areas are not natural at all. It's inequitable food distribution for a reason and it's on purpose. And yeah, either way, the healthy food priority areas or food deserts basically mean places where there is not a nearby grocery store that is accessible by transportation. And that's really important for so many reasons, right? We're talking about in the perspective of climate action, how we need, like has been found by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that we need a mass transition to more plant-based eating. And that's not possible if a large percentage of communities don't have access to more plant-based food options, right? And bringing in like throwing a Whole Foods in there or bringing in like random retailers isn't going to help either. So I think that's why it's so important that we also talk about intersectional veganism, talk about community food justice, about food sovereignty, really putting the power like in the community's hands, because for all these different reasons that factory farms and our current food systems are destructive, those are the same reasons that these options aren't accessible in so many communities, and why it's so important that in a large scale, people are able to move towards more plant-based eating, especially campaigns such as Meatless Mondays and flexitarianism has actually had a much larger impact than the percentage of people who have gone vegan, right? Just the culture change of trying to eat less red meat, trying to eat like people who start having like plant-based dairy products, like who are just open to moving in that direction, has been a large part of the change in talking about our food systems more and talking about the impact of our consumer choices. So we really need to keep moving that forward, where people are thinking about it even if they haven't gone 100% vegan yet, but like that everyone is able to think about their consumer choices and eat a food that is better for the environment and for their health, no matter where they live, is really crucial.
I think we also need to talk about like the supermarkets that are in these areas, right? Like there might be a supermarket that's like not super expensive that the community can afford, but when you look at their produce, it's disgusting. Like there's no fresh produce. You buy a bag of apples and you come home and 2 days later, like the bag of apples is rotten, right? So I think like my part in I guess like helping that is like teaching that person who has to buy those apples because they have no other choice, like what to do with that bag of apples and how to make like a whole meal for their family with that bag of apples. Obviously, I'm using like that as an example, but like a lot of times we're like, oh, well, let's just like get together as a community and advocate for something. But it's like, Jane over here who might have a family of 4 and works 60 hours a week doesn't have the capacity to like advocate for the community and make that happen. So like what Jane needs to do is learn how to use that bag of apples to like sustain. So yeah, I think it's like really important to also talk about like what they have and like how they can actually, survive with that.
Okay, so I definitely know that corporations have a really big impact with having so much power in the economy and all sorts of things. So, how are we able to really push for corporations to create a more plant based option and push for food security for consumers to create a more sustainable diet?
This is also another important topic to me, and I want to jump off what Destiny was saying about being community oriented and local. I think that that's definitely where it starts from. I mean, with Orlando Vegans, we started 7 years ago. It was local places, and that'll be the heart of what we do. but I think it's also important to support big biz because, like I said, we gotta hijack it. We gotta work with the enemy. We gotta, you know, if a non-vegan place calls me up and says we want to add vegan options, I don't want to say no because that's a move in the right direction. So, you know, I always say that when veganism is a mainstream conversation, it actually opens the doors for people who are not familiar in areas where they don't understand. So that way it can come back to local. Because if somebody is walking into, you know, like a lower end restaurant or, you know, whatever that maybe has like one vegan option, they decide to try it and they love it, then they're going to start looking for the other options that are out there. So really just like it's about supply and demand, really. I mean, we need to be active, write letters, show that being plant-based vegan is not a small town thing. It's the way of the world. Corporations are seeing that there's a demand for it and they're jumping on board, even if it is just for profit. The more we support those options, vote with our money, then the demand for vegan products will surpass their counterparts, like we've seen with Impossible and Beyond Meat, and then open the floodgates for our local places to be seen, especially the Black and brown businesses, achieve more business in the end, and then we can achieve animal liberation. So unfortunately, it does come down to business and money, but it always is like a unity, a community effort, local, just wherever we can really plant that seed.
Yeah, I think the single biggest way to make those big corporations hear you is our dollars. You know, they're looking at charts of return in investment, overhead, how they can, you know, make as much capital, and that's unfortunate, but that's the truth of it. And you know, when we see these large corporations come out with a plant-based option or leaning towards a plant-based option, we need to support it. We need to come out and support it. Like Nikki said, it may not feel good right now supporting that corporation, but in the long run, it's going to shift that demand to a more plant-based oversight. And what's going to happen is it's going to come back and support our local community as well. So, you know, there's other ways too where we're living in 2020 where we have social media. You can find all these corporations on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can message them and say, hey, do you have a plant-based option? You know, we're looking at, you know, large restaurants that we see all across the United States, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, Burger King coming out with plant-based options. That's from, you know, vegans before us and people before us calling for these things. So as long as we stand up and support them with our dollars and continue to ask for more of a transition, it's going to continue to trickle down to each of our local environments to uplift you know, our local restaurant owners as well.
Yeah, I've actually done successful campaigns for Dunkin' and for Starbucks to offer plant-based options. And I think those are really crucial in the culture change, right? Because when you see those mass advertisements and those news about, you know, about Burger King, about Dunkin', about Starbucks, about other establishments doing that, that really shows that this is catching on, that plant-based and vegan options are widespread and that they're going to lots of different locations. I think that's really important for culture change, and it's also key to know that these businesses are all keeping track of trends. So the reason why they're all looking to adopt these options and they just need a little push from a consumer to say like, hey, you should do this, is because they've been noticing that more people are interested in it and more other businesses and their competitors are doing it. And if you provide statistics, your story, and you get some people behind you, you can really make that change happen.
I think once again, I have an unpopular opinion. But because when I think of corporations, I think of like two different sides, right? I think of convenience, and then I also think of like the harm that they cause the community. On the convenience side, like, yes, it would be amazing to like pull up to a McDonald's at like 3 a.m. and get a 20-piece chicken nugget combo that's vegan, right? Like, that's amazing. Or like, if I have a work party, like we can order a vegan cheese pizza. Like that never happens. Usually at work events, like I'm the person that just can't eat, right? Like it would be nice to have that convenience. But then like on the other side, I always think about specifically like fast food restaurants that are like straight smack dead in the hood, like the McDonald's and the Burger Kings and things like that. I always think about the harm that they cause those communities. And I think a lot of people think when corporations like those fast foods come into the neighborhood, they're like, oh, well, they're giving people jobs and this, then the third. And like that is a very, that narrative is not always true. And I always try to think about once again, like the people over anything else, right? Like, what is this community actually benefiting from this corporation being in their neighborhood? Like, it's cool to have a vegan sandwich at McDonald's, but like, what is McDonald's doing for the community around me aside from like gentrifying, or like a Starbucks gentrifying and pushing me out of this community? So yeah, like while it's amazing to have these options, because of course, like when you're on the road, like it's really cool to just stop in a McDonald's or wherever, but I always think about like the bigger picture of like the harm that they're causing. And I know like we vote with our dollar, and I like what Nikki said about, you know, eventually like maybe these restaurants will be like even fully vegan because nobody is like buying the other stuff. You know, like the more we obviously support vegan options, the higher the demand. But I still always think about like the harm before I even think about that aspect.
Thank you. I wanted to add, someone actually commented on the Facebook Live that there are actually farmers markets that are accepting electronic benefit transfers in the area and even double the amount at the farmers market. So for anyone watching that's interested in reaching out to locally sourced foods, that's a also great opportunity for you. That way you don't feel limited by what you have access to. And so we really wanted to finish off this panel by asking what are some advice, words of wisdom that you have for the audience that may be looking to diversify their diet or advocate for change themselves.
I suggest meeting up with people in your community that are already doing it. I know when I went vegan, it was really, really hard for me to transition because I couldn't find anybody out here that looked like me, that talked like me, that had the same views as me, who were vegan. And until I found that community, like that's when I actually started feeling comfortable, like in my vegan lifestyle. Just seeing like other people and bouncing ideas, recipes, going to events together, and being the vegans at the events. Like it really is important to have community around you. And if you're in a position where you can't go out and find community, because I feel like, I mean, that's all of us right now during like this quarantine life, build relationships online, you know, like get recipe ideas from people like via the internet, and just explore with different foods. You know, every time I go to the supermarket, I try to pick up at least like one thing I've never tried before, or a fruit that I've never heard of before, and like just try it, just experiment with it. You know, like it's a lot of unlearning. So yeah.
I agree. I think it comes down to community as well. And Justin, you bring up a lot of great points with our last question as well. And it really does come down to community and representation in that community as well. Like Orlando Vegan started as a way so I can meet more like-minded people, because the people in my space were not really that supportive. And so I was like, you know what? Well, I don't have vegan friends, so I'm going to make vegan friends, and I'm going to help those friends make other vegan friends. And they kind of hold you accountable and keep you going. A lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but some people go vegan and then they go back because they felt the pressure of their non-vegan friends and family and this and that. It's important to have a support system, a community, really just getting out there. You don't have to be antisocial or anything. Research in your area on Instagram or on Google what you have access to. Do a lot of cooking. Cooking like is something that so many vegans love to do, and even more so now. But yeah, and I agree about representation because, you know, white veganism is a thing, and, you know, a lot of people view being plant-based and vegan as a privilege, and it's you know, and we all want to show that you can eat vegan no matter where you are. You know, if you have a health problem, or like I said, you know, disabilities, this, that, there are, you know, it's all about language and how you talk about it. But yeah, so I guess that's it. Thanks.
I think some advice I would say is, you know, just try and don't give up if you feel defeated. I personally had experiences with my family or friends transitioning where it was difficult at first, and continue to just try and try, and you don't have to achieve perfection. None of us on this panel are perfect. We don't expect you to be perfect. And the fact of you continuing to try and learn is really all that matters. And like, Destiny and Nikki said, community is important. You can reach out to people on Instagram, on Facebook, and just, look for help. There's Pinterest boards. There's a ton of people that have so much resources that can get you educated, that continue to help inspire you. But the number one thing is, if you try these things and you still feel down or you feel like you're not getting support, don't give up. Just continue to try and push. And what's going to happen is your trend or what you're trying to do is going to become a habit, and that habit's going to become a lifestyle. And you're going to begin to get a community around you slowly that will support you. And if those people don't support you, you're going to find people that will. So that would be my biggest advice: is just continue to try and know that you're not reaching perfection. We're all just trying to be better and more impactful.
Thank you so much. So first off, I want to thank the audience for being here and being present in this conversation. It's really valuable, and it's especially important when we see one another unite as community members to talk on these very sometimes uncomfortable but necessary conversations. So thank you for sitting through. And I want to then thank off all the panelists that were able to join us. Thank you for taking your time to speak here. We all appreciate your input. And finally, thank you to Ernest for helping with tech, and of course, Ellie for helping moderate. So thank you again for joining us. And we hope you all have a lovely rest of the day.